Late spring in Pennsylvania is sometimes hard to predict. April this year was unusually rainy and warm. I usually have to mow the lawn for the first time in early to mid-May, but not this year. At least it's not snowing. Last year at this time we had a blizzard and 6 inches of snow fell. I think having to mow the lawn early is worth the cost of avoiding snow. And since tax season is over, it was great to get outside in the sunshine. My house has an interesting feature. The backyard slopes heavily downward, leading to a small creek and woods behind us. When the house was built, the front of the house was leveled off the road with fill. This meant a sharp slope on about half of the side of the house. Thus, the basement, which was completely enclosed in the front, ended up open in the back. This allowed me to install a bifold service door so I could get my lawnmower and other lawn stuff in there, rather than cluttering up the garage. It was one of my favorite features of the house. I got the lawnmower done and everything fell into place. I'm allergic to grass, so I couldn't wait to go upstairs and take a shower. I was just about to get to the stairs when I heard my wife's voice. I had seen her friend's car when I was cutting the grass in front of the house, so I wasn't surprised to hear voices. But then I heard what was being said, and it made my hand pause as I reached for the doorknob. I should probably start by introducing myself. My name is Robert Crane. I prefer to be addressed by my first name, Bob, but in high school I started being called Hogan in honor of the actor Robert Crane, who played the lead role in Hogan's Heroes. I didn't mind, but the show was taken off the air before I was born and is no longer considered a pop culture benchmark. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with an accounting degree, still bearing the last name Hogan. I earned my CPA degree in minimal time after graduation and now work for a large firm in Philadelphia as a team leader, handling audits and the like. It's not the most exciting position, but it pays very well, and I've been able to see the inner workings of many companies. I have a special gift for forensic analytics, building financial trails to investigate things like fraud and money laundering. I'm starting to be seen as an expert and have even been asked to consult for the FBI on 2 cases. When we met at the beginning of freshman year, my wife Kelly was double majoring in political science and business and planning to pursue a law degree. I was sitting waiting for the first day of class when she walked in. Kelly had a tall, slender figure like a ballerina, only with slightly larger breasts. Her long, strawberry blonde hair was scattered over her bare shoulders, creating a beautiful sight. She wore a beautiful sundress with sandals that emphasized her delightful legs, smooth and firm. The mixture of innocence and sexuality was too much. I was seized with instant lust. Unfortunately, Kelly wasn't sitting next to me, nor was she in the group project. It took me 4 weeks to approach her and melt the ice. I made a silly joke and she laughed. It wasn't a graceful giggle, but a full-blown laugh. We started talking and I asked if she wanted to grab coffee after class. "I've been waiting 4 weeks for your question," she replied with a smile. For the last 2 years of college, we were rarely apart. Our parents weren't too pleased, but in our senior year of high school, we moved to live together. But they saw how devoted we were to each other and soon got over it. I didn't see how things could get any better. But it did. I graduated from high school and immediately got a job at one of the big accounting firms in Philadelphia. I was making stupid money for a 22-year-old young man who had recently graduated. Kelly was accepted to the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and we continued to live in our student apartment. My company offered to pay for my MBA, and I went to classes as well. I commuted to work every day on SEPTA, so I didn't need a car, and that kept costs down. 3 years later, Kelly graduated, and I proposed to her during a celebratory dinner at Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. 6 months later, we were married. Kelly got a job as a deputy district attorney in the Bucks County District Attorney's Office, which is north of Philadelphia. We decided to buy a house in Doylestown, where the courthouse was located. The regional railroad line ended there, and I could take the train to work every day. The drive was 80 minutes one way, but it was better than taking the Schuylkill Expressway, aka the Schuylkill Expressway, or I-95. Kelly and her mother found a house. It was a great starter home with 3 bedrooms. One of the bedrooms was set up as an office with 2 desks. I sometimes worked from home, and Kelly needed her own space for legal work. Another bedroom served as a guest room, and of course the last room was the master bedroom. Plus, it was close to her parents' house. Kelly convinced me that it would be a built-in nanny when we had kids. I was an only child and had always wanted siblings. Kelly and I started talking about kids back in freshman year and decided to wait until Kelly was settled in her career before we started trying. But now we've reached that point, and 2 days ago we decided to stop taking Kelly's birth control and start trying for a baby. I was happier than I had ever been before. And then what I heard made my hand linger on the doorknob. Hogan and I have decided it's time for me to get pregnant, Kelly excitedly announced. This excited her friend, Olivia Watkins. Both women made the same high-pitched sound that made me think of whales accidentally beached on the Jersey shore and try to reach for them. Standing on the stairs, I grinned at their excitement, which matched my own at becoming a father. I reached for my pen again when I heard a question that wiped the grin off my face and the happiness off myself. That's wonderful, Kel, Olivia said. But what are you going to do about Paul? Paul? Shh. Kelly pulled her friend to her side. Hogan's outside mowing the lawn. There was a pause, and I saw her looking around waiting for me to appear. Then she spoke again. I already told Paul I was ending the affair. He was fine with it. With Grossman leaving his Senate post, Paul thinks he has a real chance. Getting caught having an affair with a married staffer would be very ugly. So simple. 3 sentences shattered my world. Paul Evans was Kelly's boss in the DA's office. He was a widower in his early 40s. His wife Ann had died of breast cancer, and he was left a single father with their daughter Barbara. Paul was a real political animal, and Kelly enjoyed telling me stories of how he maneuvered his party to run for higher office. I guess I just found out how my wife had access to all this underground information. Really? Olivia said. Just going cold turkey? You've been hot and fun for 6 months, and you're just going to give up the stud muffin? The teasing doubt in her voice made me want to rip Olivia's head off. She was a classmate at Penn, and I knew her before Kelly. I knew Kelly and Olivia were best friends now, but I'd always assumed she was my friend too. I guess I was wrong. Stop it, Kelly protested, giggling. You're so bad. Paul is a wonderful lover, but playing with him was just rude. I love Hogan, but Paul just took me and used me however he wanted. There was no love involved, just raw sex and power. Now that Bob and I are going to have a baby, I don't want to take any chances. I love Hogan, and I will be a good and faithful mother. How many more cliches are we going to breed here? I wondered. All that's left to do is get home, discover an unfamiliar car in the driveway, find out they're having sex in my bed, and the deed will be done. I wanted to run into the room and scream. I wanted to trash the room, but my muscles stiffened with paralysis. I was so stunned I couldn't move. My heart was pounding in my ears. So, cold turkey? Olivia asked. Kelly giggled again. Well, not exactly, she admitted. I have a conference with Paul in Pittsburgh next week. We'll have farewell sex there. I'll miss the sex, but Hogan and the baby are more important. I couldn't take it anymore, but I didn't know what to do. I love Kelly, but this was killing me. At that point, I started looking at the business. I needed to step back and think. I needed to make a plan. I started stomping up the steps like I was climbing a ladder. Then I opened the door and walked into the kitchen. Kelly and Olivia were sitting there with cups of tea in front of them. Did a hint of guilt flash across Kelly's face? Honey, are you okay? She asked in a concerned voice. I realized tears were streaming down my cheeks. Allergies, I hummed. This is going to be a bad spring. Well, go upstairs and take a shower. Throw your clothes in the bathroom and I'll wash them right away so they don't contaminate your closet. I bought you a new pack of Claritin D last week. It's in the medicine cabinet. Thanks, I managed to say and headed for the stairs. I needed time to think. The next morning was Monday, and I used the excuse of an early meeting to get up and out of the house before Kelly got out of bed. The night before, I had used my allergies as an excuse to go to bed early because my emotions were running high. Sitting on the train, I thought again about what I had heard. On one hand, my wife was unfaithful, but in the end, it was a purely sexual affair to stay with me and bear me a child. Some would say that I should leave it at that and be happy that my wife is back in the marriage, planning to be a good wife and mother. However, there is a voice in my head that says that if she did it once, what's to stop her from doing it again in the future? In 10 years, when the kids are in school, won't she have another just sexy affair? And then there will be a divorce with kids, in which Kelly will likely get the kids and I will get impressive alimony and maintenance. As an accountant and business analyst, I had to think in terms of risk and reward. I found myself doing the same here. It came down to the fact that my trust in my wife was completely undermined. The just sex excuse overlooks what is really important in these cases. It is a complete lack of respect for the partner. The cheater knows they are doing wrong and hurting the other person. Otherwise, they would be doing it openly, and I would have known about it from the beginning. Don't get me wrong, I don't think I would have ever put up with her sleeping with Don, but at least if she had talked to me about it, at least some respect would have been shown. Kelly's behavior proved to me how much respect she had for me. I worked all day, but part of my brain was focused on what I had to do. I had no proof other than an overheard conversation. I hadn't even noticed any change in the last 6 months while the affair lasted. A direct confrontation without evidence would be a big risk with a little chance of reward. Kelly will deny it. Paul Evans would deny everything. Taking the case through the courts would be financial suicide, since every judge, politician, and lawyer in the surrounding counties knew Evans. I would be buried to keep his name clean. I considered just leaving and starting over somewhere else. It was tempting. But the house would be like an anchor around my neck. Kelly couldn't afford it on her paycheck alone, and we had almost no equity. She'd have to sell it almost immediately to avoid foreclosure, and with the current state of the market, that was unlikely. It would have ruined both my credit history and hers. Being a CPA with a bad credit history is not a good decision when looking for a new position. How can someone trust you with someone else's money when you clearly don't know how to handle your own? I needed proof before I could do anything about it. I got it, but from the most unlikely source. 3 days later, I stayed close to her, but I still hadn't found any evidence to back up what I'd heard. Her personal laptop was clean. No secret email accounts were found. No sexy lingerie hidden in a box in the depths of her closet. No receipts from places she wasn't authorized to go. Absolutely nothing. Then Kelly called me at work and told me we were invited to a political statement party at Paul Evans' house on Friday night. I assumed it was about his high-profile announcement that he was running for the U.S. Senate. I had thoughts about the loud statement, but I still didn't have proof, damn it. We arrived just in time for the start of the gala. Evans had a great mansion near Washington Crossing with a small horse farm. A large tent was set up in the backyard for all the guests. And when we walked in at the head of the reception line, like a king, stood asshole Paul Evans himself. Being a widower, Evans didn't have a wife to play hostess, but he had apparently enlisted his 21-year-old daughter to play the role. She stood beside her father and greeted guests as if she was born to do so. When it was our turn, Evans smiled broadly at Kelly and exclaimed, "Kelly, you did it! How wonderful!" He kissed my wife chastely on the cheek. Then he turned to me. "Robert, it's good to see you again. I would be lost without your wife, but I realize I will soon have to give her up as you begin to expand your family." He laughed at his own joke. "Just let me have her when you break up with her, and there will be no hard feelings." Laughter erupted again. Kelly even blushed slightly, and I felt like finishing the cocky guy off. I took his hint, which obviously seemed incomprehensible to him. "Who knows what the future will bring," I said in an even neutral tone. Not hostile, but by no means friendly either. In the same tone, I reported the results of the test. Evans blushed slightly, and Kelly elbowed me and muttered something about rudeness. Evans smoothly moved on to the next guest, leaving us alone with his daughter. Kelly was an incredibly attractive woman, but Barbara Evans was a vision. Even in my inner anger, I noticed it. Her dark red hair and brilliant smile made me think of a young Maureen O'Hara. If Kelly looked like a busty ballerina, Barbara looked like she belonged on a pinup swimsuit calendar next to Kate Upton. She had that combination of great looks, healthy figure, hair and skin that photographers dream of and so often have to tweak in Photoshop. Paul Evans had the perfect political family of 3. He seemed the perfect wise statesman and family man. After losing his wife to cancer, he acquired the perfect spouse. She was idolized, and any rival who attacked her was ready for career suicide. Barbara was a princess, prom queen, graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, with a degree in business and law, former gymnast, and current member of the University of Pennsylvania cheerleading team. According to Kelly's rumor, Barbara planned to try out for the Eagles cheerleading squad at the upcoming open competition, as she had just turned 21. With a late wife and a smart, beautiful, photogenic daughter, the press would love him on the campaign trail. "Robert," Barbara said excitedly, hugging me tightly. This wasn't a polite hug at a party. It was a full-body hug. Parts of her body pressed against me with great pleasure. You look gorgeous. No wonder Kelly is hiding you. You never come to any of our parties. You shouldn't work so hard. It's not healthy. Somehow, she said it all in the same breath. In less than a second, my mood changed from furious to completely shocked. I made a few polite remarks about how beautiful she looked and was about to leave when it suddenly hit me. First of all, Barbara had never said hello to Kelly. And second, what were these parties? Kelly didn't give me a chance to ask, as she herself rushed over to greet the young woman. Then we had no choice but to give way to the next in line of guests. As Kelly and I chatted, I wondered what Barbara knew. After buying my wife a drink, I asked, "What kind of parties was Barbara talking about?" Kelly only smiled and snorted dismissively. "She was just teasing you, little prankster. Paul sometimes holds team meetings and strategy sessions here. He says he thinks better with a drink in his hand, and at the bar you never know who might be in the next booth. She's been home a few times when we've met here. Don't tell anyone, but Paul let her drink at home before she turned 21. Well, I figured it out. The bastard was having sex with my wife right in his home under the guise of team meetings. Maybe they were real meetings where Kelly was the last one to leave. Or maybe she left first and came back after everyone else left. That would keep the legal department from speculating about why Kelly always stayed behind to help her boss clean up. With a dead wife and daughter away at college, he didn't need to find a secluded hotel room. Hence, no record of their meeting. So Barbara attends your team meetings? I asked. Kelly waved the question away. No, she's been home a few times when classes were canceled. She's just teasing her dad for throwing parties during work hours. She tugged on my arm. Come on, honey. Let's go pamper your fiancé. For the next hour, Kelly didn't take a step away from me. We talked to a few of her coworkers, and a few of them talked about our plans to have a baby and how sorry they would be to lose Kelly for a while, but how happy they were for Kelly and me. Honestly, I was a little puzzled. Why did all these people know about our plans? An hour later, Paul Evans called everyone to attention. His daughter stood next to him and smiled. He began by thanking everyone for coming and then announced his big campaign. Everyone was expecting it, but was still excited. I noticed the publisher of the local paper and one of his reporters taking notes. I'm sure there will be a lot written about it in tomorrow's paper. I won't bore you with the details of the party. It would have been an enjoyable time if my heart hadn't been shattered and my brain hadn't been working at maximum capacity thinking how to prove it all. About 90 minutes after the grand announcement, Margaret Williamson, the first assistant district attorney, came in and said Paul wanted to meet with his staff. Paul was an elected official and Margaret was a senior staffer who actually ran the office. District attorneys could come and go every 4 years, but Margaret was permanent. A very tough woman, but at the same time respected in the legal community for her honesty and integrity. The older female attorney was one of the reasons Kelly accepted the position. I liked her a lot. Margaret had been married for more than 30 years to an electrician who had taught her in college and now owned a pretty good electrical selection company. These two were devoted to each other. I'd always considered them an example to Kelly and me. Sorry for stealing your wife away from you, Hogan, Margaret offered. Paul wants to discuss office organization as soon as he finishes campaigning. A moment later, they were both gone. I stepped away from the small cluster of spouses left behind after the meeting and headed to the other side of the large pool across from the patio where the party was being held. There was a wicker swing chair hanging from chains. It was in the shade, so people could see me if they looked closely, but I wasn't conspicuous. In other words, it was the perfect place to gather my thoughts. I had been sitting for less than 5 minutes when a voice invaded my solitude. So this is where you're hiding, the voice purred. I looked up. Barbara had lowered herself onto the wicker swing next to me. She had arranged herself so that she was sitting facing me without saying a word. The little black dress skimmed her tanned thighs, fitting over her body, hinting at what was underneath, but revealing nothing. Seductive yet innocent at the same time. It spoke volumes about my state of mind that I noted it almost academically. You look like a man who has the weight of the world on his shoulders, she commented. I didn't really feel like talking about this with the daughter of my wife's lover, no matter how sexy she was. We've been very busy at the office. There are a lot of inspections going on, I said to end the conversation. Really? Barbara asked in an interested tone. I just finished my last accounting class in school. In several classes, we talked about the application of forensic accounting to law enforcement. I found it very fascinating. Even in my grief, this surprised me. Really? I asked in an incredulous tone. Well, it's not a sexual relationship or anything like that, but it really is detective work to pick out all the right bits of information from a mass of other facts and put them together to get a clear picture. Plus, since some people are trying to hide this information, it gets even more complicated. Most people look at it differently, I admitted. Barbara began to elaborate on what she had learned in the class and why she had enjoyed it so much. I have to say I was impressed. I've had people interning at my firm who couldn't speak so well on the subject. Focusing on her words, I brushed off both her looks and, more importantly, the rage boiling inside me. I felt myself sinking into my role as a mentor. It helped me take my mind off the emotional turmoil a bit. You really enjoyed the class, I remarked. You seem to have internalized the topic very well. Barbara blushed at my praise. For a moment, I saw a sweet girl who was genuinely touched by my praise. Actually, I was thinking about joining the FBI when I graduate from high school. Dad wants me to become a prosecutor or go to work at one of his friends' law firms. I don't think that's what I want to do. You should follow your own dreams, not your father's. It was honest advice, not that I was opposed to ruining the jerk's plans. I've done a little work with the FBI when audits turned up something criminal, sharp people. Before Barbara could respond, Kelly stepped out of the shadows. So that's where you disappeared to? You didn't do anything inappropriate? She asked in a teasing tone. Barbara turned to face my wife and smiled radiantly. We were just talking about Bob's work. We were just discussing it in class. I wanted to get an expert's opinion. Well, Hogan is one of them, Kelly said in a proud tone. I looked at one of his audit reports where an employee was embezzling money using his boss's login. Hogan caught on that some of the transfers were happening when the guy was on a business trip, but the login was from the corporate office. Most of us would have stopped when we recognized the boss. Hogan kept digging. I could have gotten a conviction against that employee the first day out of law school. Hogan left the prosecutor's office no chance of success. Kelly looked at me with pride on her face as she told this little story. It embarrassed the hell out of me. How could she be proud of me and claim to love me while being in a 6-month relationship with her damn boss? A shadow of confusion must have flashed across my face because Kelly asked, "What's wrong, honey?" "Nothing," I replied. "Just thinking about a problem." "Well, come on. It's a party," Kelly said. She struggled to catch her breath and said, "Hogan, you'll never be able to guess what an opportunity this is for me. Paul and Margaret want me to take over the administrative work since I plan to go on maternity leave as soon as you finish your job. That way, when I leave, there won't be any work left to do. I will be working directly for Margaret." My heart sank at the thought of Kelly being away from that bastard Paul. My hopes were dashed in an instant. "I'll have to travel sometimes," Kelly continued. "I'll be delivering important papers to Paul during the campaign, so I won't be involved in his campaign, but I'll get to see some of the behind-the-scenes action. It's going to be a lot of fun." I felt my heart break again. I know I'd heard Kelly say she planned to end the affair so we could have a baby, but I could easily imagine her rekindling the affair in anticipation of joining the campaign. And if she gets pregnant, who's to say the baby will be mine? The gender depends on my height and skin color. Without a DNA test, it would be very difficult to determine that. My anger started to rise, but I held it back. Now was not the time. Barbara started talking to Kelly about her new position in the campaign. Soon they were engrossed in conversation and I was forgotten. I took this opportunity to pull myself together. After tonight, I would start planning. I needed to counter Paul's political power somehow, but frankly, I had no idea how to do it. The answer arrived in my office 2 days later. "Your appointment is at 4 o'clock, the receptionist informed me through the open door. We're not allowed to call them secretaries anymore. I glanced at my Outlook calendar and saw nothing scheduled there. Before I could respond, she, Barbara Evans, walked in. "Hi, Hogan," she said hello as she entered the house. Her long, dark red hair flowed down over her shoulders. She was wearing a light sundress showing off her gorgeous legs and sandals with straps that encircled her legs almost to her knees. Her breasts were modestly covered, no cleavage was visible, but the material pressed against her chest suggestive. 2 thin straps supported the dress, leaving her arms exposed. I watched confused as she entered. "I hope you don't mind," Barbara began. She closed my office door behind her. I told Mary we had an appointment to discuss my career and how Kelly works for my father. I politely rose from my chair. I'm glad to see you. I was just working on some reports. I gestured for her to take one of the chairs in front of my desk. When she was seated, I sat down. What did you want to talk about? The happy face suddenly disappeared from Barbara's face. I think you know, Bob. I saw it in your face when you were talking to my bastard father. I'm so sorry he destroyed such a good guy. I was stunned. This was not what I had expected. What are you talking about? I asked cautiously. Barbara grimaced. About that asshole known as my father having an affair with your wife. I leaned back in my chair at the fact that it was said so bluntly. Did you just find out? Barbara asked softly. I nodded. I'm very sorry. When did you find out? I asked. About 3 months ago, Barbara admitted. I don't know when it started, but I found out in February. I came home early one Friday and we were having one of their meetings at our house. I had a late lunch with a high school friend, so I just ran in there to drop off my stuff, say hello, and leave. Dad asked when I'd be home, and I said after dinner. Turns out my friend was sick and couldn't make it. I grabbed a bite to eat and went home. I saw Dad and Kelly having sex in our hot tub. I took pictures of them and even made them run naked into the house. There was a foot of snow on the ground. You took pictures of your dad having sex? I asked in shock. I also wondered if I could get copies of the pictures. That would be very helpful in a divorce. As if reading my mind, Barbara reached into her bag, pulled out a large envelope and placed it on my desk. Here are pictures of that day and a few others. She paused and grinned. Dad installed a security system in the house. Everything is locked from the outside and there are cameras in several rooms. If you know the location and have a key fob and password, you can get into the house from almost anywhere. There's a thumb drive with video footage on it. I was shocked. Paul's daughter was handing me everything I needed to divorce and destroy her father. Why? I asked. The sad expression on Barbara's face was replaced with anger. Because, she said in a low voice, I hate that bastard more than you ever could. I answered nothing, but waited. After a moment, she spoke. Dad met Mom when she was in college. He was an aspiring attorney and worked in the sex crimes unit in Philadelphia. Mom had come from Ireland to study. Her family was well-to-do, but died in the Londonderry bombing. She came here to get away from the riots. There was a soft note in her voice that she had probably adopted from her mother. Mom dated some loser who hit her so hard she ended up in the emergency room. Kelly paused and placed a small book on my desk. It was quite thick and decorated with green lace. I found her diary after she died, and she was something of a submissive. She liked to be led by a strong man. This asshole took it too far and she ended up in the hospital. Dad was assigned the case. They met, the asshole went to jail, and a year later they were married. Dad was always ambitious. He got a smart, beautiful woman with an exotic accent. Mom got a strong man who would protect her. I came along a few years later. Dad wanted me to do gymnastics. He thought his daughter's performance in the Olympics would do wonders for his political career. Do you know how most gymnast careers end? I shook my head and said, I never thought of that. Barbara smiled. I was told to do cheerleading and be an all-American girl. I didn't mind, as I loved performing. But by the time I was 16, I realized I was just a prop for my father's ambitions. Mom knew about it almost from the beginning. Dad had been having affairs almost from the moment they were married. Mom knew and begged him to stop, but she was too weak to do anything about it. She felt trapped. She was a staunch Catholic, so divorce was out of the question. Barbara paused for a moment and I let her gather her thoughts. After a moment, she continued. Sometimes I wonder if her bad reaction to her cancer treatment was the result of her subconsciously wanting to die or actively sabotaging her treatment. Either way, I was with her in the hospital when she died. The official story is that my father was in court seeking a murder charge. He got the doctor to change the time of death. He actually did it with his help in her apartment to celebrate. He just made his mom look like a trophy, and the press loved the story of how they met. Heroic prosecutor goes to rescue a battered woman. Hell, the bastard beat her himself more than once for all I know. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. Because you don't deserve it, Hogan. My father, he's not a very nice man. After my mom died, he hid his affairs until I went away to college. Then he started having meetings at the house, and they aren't just for his work. He also holds meetings for some of the charitable groups he's involved in. I know for a fact that he sleeps with two other women from these groups. One of the poor women thinks it's true love and is going to leave her husband. Kelly thinks that? I asked. I knew I'd heard that, but I was still curious. Barbara shook her head and replied, "No, she seems to think it's just entertainment. They say strength is the best aphrodisiac. Kelly seems to be proof of that. I heard her telling Dad about some senator they're dating and how excited she was when she got back to Doylestown." I flinched at such a rude remark. I even remembered that day. I had come home to a wild woman, and it had been one of the best nights of sex of my life. Now the cherished memory was tainted because I knew my wife probably wasn't even thinking about me at that moment. "So what do you want?" I asked. To her credit, Barbara looked me straight in the eye as she answered. "I want you to dissolve your marriage to that cheating man. I want my father's career ruined to the point where he will never be elected dog catcher in a town full of cats." I thought about just sending my stuff to the papers or even the other side, but he has too many friends. I think together we can make them pay. "Won't it be harder for you to finish school?" She shook her red hair again. "No, my mom left me an inheritance in the form of a trust fund. I haven't touched it, but if I needed to, I could pay for the rest of my tuition and MBA, and I'd have a nice reserve left over." "If your mom had that much money, why didn't she take you and leave? She could have gone to Ireland, wherever your father went." Barbara wrinkled her nose. "Like I said, she was raised Irish Catholic. She was taught that divorce was not an option. No matter what happened, Mom held on to her faith until the very end. That's the only thing that makes me think her death was unconscious rather than intentional, since suicide is also considered an unpardonable sin among them. I have to admit that I saw nothing but the truth in Barbara. She said she wanted to ruin her father's career, and my having that information didn't bode well for his ambitions. I couldn't imagine that this could be some kind of trap. If Kelly and Paul wanted to wipe me off the face of the earth, they could do it openly in court. That kind of despicable shit was only appropriate if they were desperate. Like me. A plan began to form in my head. I would need Barbara's help on a few cases. That would show me how determined she was to destroy her father. "Okay," I agreed. "But I don't want to destroy him by publishing those pictures or even mentioning his name in the divorce." Barbara looked at me in surprise. "Why?" she demanded. Her face flushed with passion and she took a breath to start some kind of speech. I stopped her with a raised hand. "I didn't say we wouldn't destroy him, but I don't want to deal with the bad press when a cuckolded husband gets caught up in a political scandal. Instead, I want to destroy what he's worked his whole life for, destroy his power and influence, and I can have a quiet and peaceful divorce that no one will worry about." Barbara looked at me with shock on her face. After a moment, a sly smile appeared on her face. "What do you want from me?" I smirked. "I'm going to do what I do best. Get me his financial records, personal and campaign. They got Capone thanks to tax evasion. Knowing your father, I'm sure I can find something. And if you don't find—" "What?" she asked. I smiled. "I can cook something." For the next 3 days, Barbara and I kept busy. She installed a keystroke logger on my father's personal laptop and home computer. She also made a full backup of his computer's hard drive. We customized their security system so that it would upload the recordings to a cloud storage service I knew of, which was physically located overseas. How nice of the asshole to bug his own house. For my part, I didn't tap Kelly's cell phone. Thanks to Barbara's evidence, I didn't need anything else. But I did activate a GPS tracker designed for parents watching their kids. It basically used cell towers for location unless I sent a command to activate the GPS. I just didn't want him to catch me at home when I was busy working. I faked a groin injury the day after Barbara first came to see me. It gave me an excuse not to have sex with my wife. I never thought I'd have to make up an excuse not to have sex with my beloved wife. After learning about Paul's number of partners, I didn't want to risk even more than I had unknowingly done. Besides, I don't think I could have done it without venting my anger. By the way, I made a doctor's appointment to get tested for STDs. Nothing came up at first, but for some of them, like HIV, it can take months before they test positive for antibodies. Kelly arrived at the conference in Pittsburgh, annoyed and upset to see Paul one last time. Not surprisingly, she was very excited about the trip. After Paul had left her hanging for the past few days, she was very excited. Some guys might have given her goodbye sex as revenge. My problem was that somewhere inside I still loved her. I could never trust her again, but that didn't mean I didn't love her. But I also couldn't bear the thought of having sex with her after what I'd learned. It was Thursday morning, and Kelly was waiting with her packed bag for Paul and a junior associate from their office who was traveling with them to a conference. I wondered if the young guy knew he was their cover. "So I'll be home Sunday afternoon," Kelly said, following me into the house and dropping my bag by the front door. I sat down at the table with my back to her and sipped my coffee. She put her arm around me and leaned in so that her lips were next to my ear. "I hope you're feeling better and we can start on the baby," she whispered. Her tone would have revitalized even a dead man, and her scent, it brought me back to more innocent days. I wanted to cry right there, but I managed to restrain myself. "I'll ice it so it heals," I assured her. I stroked her hand and kissed her forehead. She moaned. "I wish I didn't have to go to this. It would be so much better to just stay home with you and be naked all weekend." "You can always tell Evans that something more important came up," I said. "It just came out." And from the way she looked at me, she heard something in my tone. "What's the problem, Paul?" she asked in an astonished voice. "First you were rude at the party and now you sound like you hate the man." I forced myself to calm down and shrugged. "Honestly, I've seen too many hotheads like Evans who think they're untouchable and the epitome of power. They're the big fish in a small pond. They sell the illusion of power and get people to buy into it. Like that mayor in South Carolina last year. Big, powerful guy, embezzled the city's money by sleeping with 3 married women. Now he's serving 10 years in federal prison, and they're all divorced and publicly humiliated. I have the same feeling about Evans. If he makes it to Washington, he'll be doing it with clueless interns in as little as a week. But eventually his wheels will fall off. And when that happens, his shit is going to fly in all directions." Kelly stared at me in shock. She'd heard me rant about these creeps before, but she'd never before associated Evans with them. I probably should have kept my mouth shut, but it felt good to let it out. Even though our marriage was over, I felt it was only fair to warn Kelly. I still loved her, even if I would never confide in her again. "Hogan, that's a terrible thing to say about Paul," Kelly protested. "He's a good man who's done a lot for the people of this county. He's not like that." I heard the almost pleading tone in her denial. At a moment that could not have been anticipated, we heard the sound of a car klaxon coming from the house. Paul had arrived. Kelly sighed disappointedly. She cast a look at me in which regret and almost fear flashed quickly. "I'll be home in 4 days," Kelly said in a conciliatory tone. "Then we can talk about it. But be prepared, love. We need to have a baby." She then wrapped her arms around me and kissed me passionately. I returned the kiss just as fervently. "Have a good week," she exhaled. "I love you." "I love you too," I replied. She grabbed her bag and opened the front door. "Bye, sweetie," she said over her shoulder. "Bye, Kelly," I said. Then I closed the door. 30 minutes later, I boarded the train and headed into town. Barbara and I had an appointment at the FBI. It turned out that I didn't need to get any evidence. I would rate Paul Evans' embezzlement abilities as moderately intelligent. Barbara and I met at her off-campus apartment to go over the documents she pulled from his computer. Pretty standard procedure. By my calculations, he had about $2 million stashed away in an offshore account. At least that's how much he transferred into it, but I can't be sure it's still there because those records weren't included. Most of this money came from various small donors who wouldn't raise suspicion with the IRS. But why were people from other states donating to the DA's campaign? I was able to trace some of them to defendants whose cases were dismissed or to plea bargains with unusually lenient sentences. It was Barbara who discovered the biggest bombshell. Turns out she wasn't an only child. Evans knocked up 2 other women during this time. One of them was born 3 years before his wife's death. The baby's mother was one of his female co-workers. The third child was born 8 months after his wife's death to an 18-year-old female volunteer at the hospital where his wife was treated. Evans transferred $2,000 a month from campaign contributions to each woman as poll research consultants. Barbara nearly trashed her own apartment in anger. That red hair really is a warning. By the time Kelly and Paul left, we had already figured out everything in Paul's notes. There were still questions, but we didn't have enough resources to get to the information. So I wrote down all the findings and set up a meeting with a senior FBI agent I worked with in the Philadelphia office. Barbara showed up to tell him the story we had come up with. Barbara testified that after taking a forensic accounting course, she wanted to look at the actual records. She decided to review her father's records out of innocent curiosity. When she noticed some oddities, she called me because my wife had worked for her father and knew of my experience. Gary was a seasoned professional. He knew there was more behind it, but we threw a gift-wrapped present in his lap and he didn't push it. A dirty prosecutor in his own backyard? A dirty prosecutor who just launched a campaign for the U.S. Senate? This career-enhancing case fell like manna from heaven. We caught a cab to Barbara's apartment since she had a late class, and I walked to the 30th Street station to catch the train home. I was already thinking about packing up and leaving when Kelly got home. Gary promised to expedite the case and at least subpoena Evans's records by Wednesday. It was unlikely that rumors of an investigation would spread before then. That bastard will realize how illusory his power is when all the rats abandon his ship. Kelly called me on the train ride home. She said she called early because they were going to some big dinner and it would be very late before she got back to her room. I had no doubt she wasn't going to stay in her room tonight. I made a few vague remarks saying it was fine. She caught my distracted tone and asked what was wrong. I just had a meeting with FBI agents on a case, I replied. I'm on the train, plus the investigation is still ongoing, so I can't talk about it. All of this was the absolute truth. It sounds like you've really been hurt, Kelly said, her tone concerned. Yes, this story is going to be horrible. When the whole story leaks out, it'll probably make the national news. Really? Kelly asked, looking a little intrigued. Maybe you can give me a little clue? I couldn't resist. Criminal politician, bribes, money laundering, sex, adultery, kids. Typical summer romance. Anyone I know? I grimaced. I've already said too much. If I say anything else, the Bureau will shut me down. Oh, you're no fun, Kelly pouted. Don't worry, honey. Your secret is safe with me. We said our goodbyes and she left. As I walked into the house, it hit me. My marriage was over. We had dated and been married. We had been together for 10 years. I never expected to be single again, but that's what I was facing now. I ended up just sitting on the couch and waiting for the sun to set. I just sat there and watched. I felt like I was watching my life disappear over the horizon. I just watched. It was many hours after sunset before I stirred again. It was Saturday afternoon when I came out of a fit of self-pity. I'm not saying I didn't deserve an indulgence, but I knew I needed to shake things up. Ironically, I was mowing the lawn again when I saw a BMW convertible pull into my driveway. I stopped the mower and watched Barbara get out of the car. The first thing I saw was her long, pale legs sticking out of the driver's side. She was again wearing sandals with thin laces wrapped around her calves. They always made me think of the ancient Greeks. As she stood, I could see her sculpted legs tense up, which spoke of the strength hidden beneath her firm flesh. In keeping with the Greek trend, she was wearing a white toga-like dress that was mid-thigh length, but with 2 inches of lace underneath, allowing a few tantalizing glimpses of her upper thighs. The dress was a light, silky material that hugged her curves and was semi-transparent. There was nothing on her arms but light freckles dotting the skin on her upper arms and shoulders. The dress was slipped over only one shoulder, leaving the other bare. Her long red hair came down in waves over those same shoulders. However, it was her gray-green eyes and smile that caught my attention as she approached me. I turned off the engine and greeted her. "Well, you look better than I expected," Barbara said. "I half expected to have to pull you out of a bottle or slide you down a ledge." I snorted. I'd thought a lot about both options last night. "It had to be done," I said. "Besides, it takes my mind off work." "Not seeing a lawyer?" she asked. I shrugged. "I did that on Tuesday before they even left. The paperwork will be ready on Monday. I arranged to do an audit with a client in Austin and leave on Tuesday. Usually these business trips last 3 days, and then I work remotely until the report is ready. In this case, I'll be there all 3 weeks." I shrugged. It's probably a coward's way out, but I don't want to stay here when this whole mess is over. I saw the agreement on Barbara's face. She knew it would draw attention to her too, as the bastard's daughter. "I'm glad you're thinking ahead," the redhead said, "but I realize that's what you're good at." The smile reappeared. "Now I know how to plan." "Here's my plan," Barbara announced. "I'll help you finish your work here and then you'll come to my place. We'll have fun, and you can even fondle me as much as you want." I have a swimsuit you're sure to love. The last was said in a voice that could have lifted even a dead man. I tried to justify myself. Barbara, I'm still married, I protested, and I don't think I'll be ready for anything else for a while. You need to blow off some steam before you blow up, the sexy redheaded girl insisted. Besides, you know the old saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Her gaze was playful, sly, and guileless all at the same time. I couldn't help but laugh. By one of those bizarre coincidences that prove truth is stranger than fiction, we ran into Olivia. After finishing up my yard work, I cleaned myself up and we headed out for a late lunch at a nice restaurant. I wasn't really looking forward to revenge sex, but it was nice to get out of the house. And going on a date with a woman as nice as Barbara, and who looked just like Barbara, wouldn't be difficult at all. As I pulled up to the restaurant, I noticed a car parked a little closer to it. It was Oliva's car. I always thought it was a crime to put OBX and Jersey Shore bumper stickers on a Mustang GT. I almost told Barbara to turn around and we'd find another place, but I didn't. Instead, I did something completely inappropriate to her. It was all done on a whim. After all my careful planning, something inside me just exploded when I saw Olivia's car parked in that lot. I nonchalantly hugged the red-headed beauty and ushered her into the restaurant without further ado. I tipped the owner to seat us at a particular table. It was a little shaded, but it was clearly visible when we returned from the restroom. I sat Barbara down facing outward and settled down next to her myself. She smiled as I took her hand. "What brought this on?" she asked with a sweet smile. "Not that I'm complaining." I laughed. "Remember when I told you about how I found out about my wife cheating on me? Her friend Olivia? Well, her car is parked right on this street." Barbara broke into a throaty laugh. "So I'm going to be the other woman. Ooh, I can live with that." She leaned forward and plunged an incredibly tender kiss on my lips. It wasn't a deep, passionate kiss, but rather a kiss that hinted and promised that there was more to come. A lover's kiss. The food arrived, and I was frankly enjoying myself. The subterfuge was forgotten while I enjoyed Barbara's company. Her keen sense of humor was just killing me. Never before had I heard accounting services sound so dirty. Casually glancing around, I noticed Olivia walk past us. I pointed her out to Barbara. "Oh, how cute," she giggled. "I've been looking forward to this." With those words, she leaned forward to kiss me. I ran my hand under the table along her leg. The skin of her thighs was so incredibly soft, and underneath hid firm, supple muscles. The touch was electric. I was so immersed in the sensations that I was surprised to hear Olivia yelling at me. "Hogan, what the hell are you doing?" She yelled at me. "Who is this tramp? Hitting on your wife while she's out of town? I thought better of you." I have no doubt the whole restaurant heard her. I let go of Barbara and turned to look at my former friend. "What's your problem, Liv? It's just a little carefree sex before Kelly and I settle down and have a baby. And you can resist that? People are trying to eat." Olivia stared at me like I'd hit her with a dead fish. "What?" she started. "Come on, Liv. Kelly's doing the same thing. I'm pretty sure she's having sex with her boss right now. Has been for months now. So I figured it was only fair that I have sex with my boss's adult daughter." I think Olivia almost had a heart attack. I felt Barbara start to giggle and squeezed her lightly to keep her quiet. Of course, I forgot where my hand was and her giggle turned into a moan of pleasure. "You know about," Olivia said, stammering. "I know about having to be a faithful husband who has no clue about anything while my wife is being helped by a woman I thought was a close friend." Olivia wrinkled her nose at the contempt in my voice. "I know Kelly wanted one last taste of weirdness before having a baby. Sort of like a last fling before the wedding. If that was okay for her, what's your problem with me?" I had no information that Kelly had had any affairs before Paul's asshole, but as the saying goes, once a cheater, always a cheater. I just noted my suspicion and wondered if Liv would go out of her way to confirm it. She said, "You know about that too?" She sighed. "No, but thanks for confirming it," I replied. Olivia turned pale at that. "Go away, Olivia," I said. She turned and disappeared behind the desk. A few minutes later, we heard a noise. It was Olivia leaving the restaurant. "Well, it was fun while it lasted," Barbara said with a slight chuckle. "I really wish she'd been there longer." Her smile made me blush. "You know she's probably on the phone with your wife right now," she added. "Probably," I agreed. "I'm giving her 5 minutes before my phone goes off." However, if she leaves right now, the drive home from Pittsburgh will take 5 hours. That will give us time for dessert and for me to get home and pack. I'd like to see you in a bikini like you promised. Barbara laughed again. Oh, I guess we can do that another time. She reached up to grab my shirt and pull me closer. You know my semester ends in a week and a half, she whispered in my ear. I've always wanted to see Austin. I barely caught her words before her tongue slid into my ear. Epilogue. Yes, this really is when the shit hit the fan. Kelly started calling me 10 minutes after Olivia left the restaurant. I listened to a few of her messages and she was furious that he cheated on her. It almost made me laugh. After an hour of her messages and texts, I blocked her number. I knew she would eventually just call from another phone, but she was driving from Pittsburgh in her car, so she couldn't just ask to borrow someone's phone on the highway. I came home and packed up all my personal belongings, not just the ones for the trip to Austin. I had time. 4 hours after meeting Olivia, I was driving away from my house, probably for the last time. I checked into a hotel near the Philadelphia airport, putting most of my belongings in storage until I found a place to stay. I talked to Barbara a few times on the phone. She had gone to a friend's house as her father was now leaving furious messages on her phone. I rescheduled my flight to Austin for the day and left Monday morning. Kelly managed to call my phone several times from other numbers. Now it was tearful rants about how I could do this to her, why I ruined her career, etc., etc., etc. Apparently, Olivia's initial outrage got the attention of a lot of people. Then someone posted a pretty accurate account on their blog and called Barbara and I players. My comment about Kelly dating Paul was also published along with the fact that they were together in Pittsburgh over the weekend. This caused quite a stir in county political circles and at the courthouse. For the rest of the week, I avoided most news from Philadelphia. It wasn't until Friday that I received an email that told me what was happening in Doylestown. Surprisingly, it was from Margaret, a senior manager in the DA's office. The elderly attorney was apologizing for everything that had happened. She knew that Paul had been seeing two women outside the office, but knew nothing about Kelly's involvement. She also welcomed the fact that I had used the law against the attorney in retaliation. According to Margaret, that week at DA Buck's office was eventful. On Monday morning, Paul was in the office trying to deal with the fallout and denying any inappropriate behavior on his part. It was just my daughter rebelling under the influence of a cheating husband, is how he tried to present the story. On Tuesday, Kelly was served with divorce papers for adultery. In the envelope were photos, DVDs, and a letter from me. To Kelly's scream of horror as she read my note, Margaret and two others ran into the office. Kelly collapsed in her chair in shock, and Margaret noticed the photos scattered across the desk. In the letter, I informed Kelly that I wasn't having an affair, but I hoped that she now understood how I felt about her and the jerk. I told her I couldn't be married to someone I didn't trust, especially now that I found out she'd already cheated. There wasn't much to do at the DA's office on Tuesday. The next day, Margaret was in Paul's office for a meeting when four men in suits suddenly walked in. Paul was yelling at them for interrupting an important meeting when one of the men informed Paul that he had been arrested. He was in complete shock as they handcuffed him and let him out of the office, she said. They walked him right through the front door of the courthouse and let the reporters through, who had somehow been alerted. I owe Gary a few beers for that. At the end of the letter, Margaret apologized for allowing them to behave in her office. She also asked me to let her know if I needed anything, as I did not deserve this behavior. I'm sure part of her letter had to do with damage control, but mostly I think Margaret was the moral and professional person I always thought she was. Now all my plans for a quiet divorce have gone to hell because of my own stupid, impulsive antics with Olivia at that restaurant. Philadelphia news outlets quickly learned of Paul's arrest and the charges against him. As I told Kelly, the story had all the hallmarks of a summer romance: sex, betrayal, revenge, and too much angst. News outlets loved it, and it was quickly picked up by hungry 24-hour news services. I managed to avoid the worst of it because I was out of town and they couldn't track me down, as I had booked a second hotel room 10 miles away from the one listed on my work itinerary. However, I checked in there, and the reporters camped around it trying to catch me. I saw on TV that they were camped out in front of my house. Kelly didn't come out, and they only managed to film my relatives going in and out of the house. Barbara had it the worst, for she was the daughter who turned in her own father. She still had to go to classes and take exams, so for the first few days it was pretty easy for the press to find her. Then the school kicked reporters off campus because they were disturbing the students. It also helped that two women who had children with Paul claimed their own 15 minutes of fame. After wrapping up the last issue, Barbara slipped off campus and headed for the airport. The media was disappointed, but not too surprised when she didn't show up at the graduation ceremony. After a while, the story moved into the secondary news category and stayed there. It heated up when Paul's trial began, but he pleaded guilty to several charges that resulted in him facing 20 years of time in the federal government. Fortunately, his guilty plea resulted in Barbara and I not being called to testify. And then it all disappeared off their radar, taking Barbara, Kelly, and me with it. Oddly enough, after all that publicity, my divorce went quickly and smoothly. Kelly signed the papers 4 days after receiving them. I received a letter apologizing for what she had done to me and to us. When she returned from Pittsburgh, she swore in a rage that she would never forgive me for cheating on her. When she found out that she was really the only one who had cheated, she realized how hypocritical she had been. She accepted my offer of a 50-50th split and asked that, at some point when things were less complicated, I agree to meet with her so she could apologize in person. She ended by saying that she would always love me and wished me well. I later learned from her mother that she had quit her job and moved to the Midwest to live with her aunt. Paul's capture did wonders for my career. In the press, the FBI gave me full credit for analyzing Paul's records. Since I was hiding from the same press, in Austin I was even more thorough and found not only the embezzler they were looking for, but also a second embezzler who was unknown at the time. My firm promoted me and put me in charge of the white-collar crime team. And yes, some joker called that team Hogan's Heroes. But the best part was that I was given an assistant, a recent college graduate looking to gain experience in forensic accounting. I never liked working late, and that bikini looked even better on my hotel room floor. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.